Hi, everyone. Welcome back to CAHS Career Prep, where we talk all about how to get you ready for a career in arts, humanities, and social sciences. I'm Nicole McDavid, and in today's episode, we will be talking all about salary negotiation. To discuss this topic, we have professional Miss Tammara Buckey here with us today. Tammara is an entrepreneur and CEO of Raise Your Own Bar. Tammara learned to negotiate as a child from her stepdad, who showed her how to haggle at the flea market over roller skates. I love that. That's amazing. She has over 2 decades of experience, ranging from a handful of startups, 3 Fortune 50 companies, to the U.S. Department of Defense and foreign government. Tammara coaches and trains others how to negotiate, resolve conflicts, communicate better, and get better results through relationships. It is so great to have you here, Tammara, and we're excited to talk with you about salary negotiation. This is a big topic. I actually, in the reach out that you and I had through a friend of mine, Kristen Scroggin, I was talking to her and I said, for this particular interview, we need somebody to talk about salary negotiation. And so she said, well, I'll do a call out on my LinkedIn. And she did. And I was amazed how quick and how many responses there were from people not only talking about salary negotiation, their own experiences with salary negotiation, but also saying, are you actually teaching a class on salary negotiation, and can I take it? And so I think this is something that a lot of people in all areas of their career have questions about. So to kind of begin with, can you walk me through the process of salary negotiation, how you would even start that, especially for students who are going into that job market for the first time?
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here and be part of this conversation. It is much needed and it is something I'm very passionate about. I did put together kind of a little step-by-step guide.
Yeah.
So the first thing is you just need to know it's about selling yourself. You know, we don't like to look at ourselves as products, but essentially that's what you're doing. And just like any other purchase, the buyer, in this case the employer, wants to feel like they got a good deal. They want to feel like they're paying less than what you're worth. And then conversely, you want to feel like you're getting a good deal, right? As the employee, you want to feel like you are getting paid maybe a little bit more than what you're worth. And so that's kind of the structure. It's very important that you need to know what you want going in. You need to know what your bottom dollar is that you'll take, what benefits you need to walk away from, and know if this is the right fit for you. For example, you wouldn't go into Walmart and apply for a cashier role and expect to make $50 an hour. You would be realistic about the position. So that's first and foremost. You got to do your research. You got to know, what does this job pay? What's the appropriate range for this particular role in this particular industry, as well as in this particular region? Because as you know, for example, what an accountant makes in Huntsville, Alabama is different than what an accountant makes in New York City. So you're going to want to do your research. You want to then determine what is acceptable for you. And once you decide what you want, now it's up to you to build your case. You have to highlight yourself, all of your value, and this is where you want to set yourself apart. So write down all the things that make you the perfect fit for this job, and really focus in on those things that bring value to the firm. And then you got to wait for the right time. You don't want to start that conversation right away. Typically, it's best to wait until they offer you a position, at least demonstrate that they're interested in hiring you. And then that kind of opens the door for negotiating. When you start to initiate, you always want to, one, express that you're grateful for the opportunity, how excited you are about the position, maybe lead with how you can recognize this is a good fit for you, and then demonstrate why, and then explain what you're looking for. You may not get what you want right away, so there needs to be some room for back and forth conversation. But this is where you're going to present your case. This is why I'm the best person. This is why I deserve this salary requirement based on my experience, my expertise, my skills, and maybe it's all what you're continuing to work on as well. You might be a student that's going through grad school, and so you know that value will come as soon as you graduate. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. And as you're going through and having this conversation with them, you want to be flexible and you want to be adaptive. You want to listen for those opportunities to be creative. It's not just about money, although that is a big part of it, but time off, benefits, flexibility in work schedule, flexibility in work location, things like that all need to be taken into consideration. And then know your worth and know when to walk away. Like, I hate to say that, but not every job is for you, right. And not every employer is going to fit your needs. And so it's good for you to be realistic about that. And throughout this whole thing, make sure that once you do agree on something, it's put down in writing, and then maintain your professionalism. Even if they end up not meeting your needs, it's okay. This may not be right for you, but it's good to have that rapport built and have that relationship, because you don't know, this could lead to another assignment down the road. Maybe they don't have the perfect fit for you right now, but one opens up and they remember you. Yeah. So I know that's a lot, but that's kind of my 12-step process on how to negotiate.
That's great. And that, I think, is such a really in a very concise way of helping, those that are looking for jobs for the first time. Some of the big points that you talked about, things like making sure that you do your research about not only the company itself, but what should you be paid in any particular position, and having to kind of get that navigation through that to make sure that you're going into the position with the right mindset, and that you're coming in with a wealth of knowledge on your side of it, so that you're able to connect and know kind of what the expectations should be as you go into that particular role. So with that in mind, let's say you go in and you attempt to negotiate your salary or other aspects of your benefits with the job, but then they deny that. And of course, one of the things that you can do obviously is walk away, but kind of how could you bridge that divide, or what are some things that you can do if that happens, if they, deny that negotiation? Because I think that's probably one of the biggest fears that students have, is that they're try to negotiate, it gets denied, and then they're like, now what do I do?
Yeah, and that's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to feel like they have no power, and that's what it comes down to. If you're in a situation where you're negotiating a new position and they don't have room for negotiations with salary, I would ask why. Is it because there's a restriction? For some positions, they have a pay band or a range, and perhaps what you asked for is outside of that range. So it's good to understand why you're being denied. It might be something where they don't feel like you're qualified enough. And so that's where you have to have a strong case. You have to be able to present that appropriately. If they're unwilling to negotiate at all on salary, are they willing to move on something else? Can they give you additional time off, because that has a value? If they can't meet the direct salary requirements, perhaps they can do a recruitment bonus, or they can do, there are different ways that you can give bonuses. But one employer in my past, they gave bonuses every quarter. And with those bonuses written in every quarter that I would get as long as I was meeting my expectations, that got me to where I wanted to be for my annual salary. But they couldn't give it to me in the actual salary. So, be creative. That's why it's important to think through all of your different options. If you're in a position where they tell you straight up, this is what the salary is, there's no room to negotiate, that's unfortunate, but then you do need to think that through and decide, is this worth your time? Do you want to work for a company that has no room for negotiations? How does that make you feel? Do you think you can fit in there? And that's really a personal question. And there's a lot of factors that go into making that decision. How much do you need this job? How much is this job in line with your dream job and your career goals? There is no right answer, unfortunately, and you can't make people negotiate, but you can do your best to be persuasive, present your case fairly, and if they still won't work with you, then you need to decide, is that where you want to be?
That's great. So I think another question that sometimes students have is this kind of fear that if you're doing salary negotiation, or if you're asking for a raise once you get into that job, will it create conflicts within the workplace with other coworkers? Because then there's maybe the fear that, it will be imbalanced, or if you're doing the same job as somebody else, if you get a raise, why shouldn't they get a raise too? And so I think that's something that many students kind of have a concern about, is when they're in that workplace setting, especially as, a newer employee, how do they navigate that, and making sure that they're confident in asking for what they want, but also maybe keeping good rapport amongst those that they work with.
Well, I understand your concern, but I don't think they're as big as what they appear to be. One, this conversation is confidential. This is between the employee, the prospective employer, and probably the HR representative. Most of the time, the salary is not going to be discussed by the hiring manager or the person that would be your quote boss. It's normally, unless it's a very small business and there's no HR person, typically that is a conversation that is just within those, held with those two people. So not everybody is going to be privy to that information, first of all. Second of all, it's not good to compare yourself. In general, it's not good to compare yourself, but you have to do what's best for you based on where you sit, what your skill set is, what your experience is, and what your needs are. So while you might feel bad if you happen to know, let's say, an employee that already works there and you know what they make, that's not your concern, really. Maybe you could help that person figure out how to negotiate better for themselves, but that shouldn't stop you from asking for what you want and for what you need. And then the last thing is, it's expected. It is expected to negotiate, and a lot of employers, they are just going into it waiting for you to bring something to the table and ask. If you don't, it might be a pleasant surprise for them that they don't have to go through that negotiations process, but it is typical. So I don't think you should have fears about it, for those three reasons. And if you do, just remember that this is a private conversation. It's not something that's going to be put on blast to everybody in the company. And unless you choose to disclose it, you're unlikely to open yourself up to that. Now, if you do decide to disclose it, because some people are very open about discussing salary, I'm not. For a variety of reasons, I found that it can create some kind of hostility. If you decide to talk about it openly, then just be aware that you might open yourself up for some jealousy and potential hostility. So you would have to use your judgment on that. And, I typically only talk salary with people that I trust. And it is a kind of a hush-hush conversation because I know the negative outcome that it could have.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight on that. So with the idea of, as you kind of talked about a little bit, of being confident in kind of your skills and the experience that you have in that salary negotiation, what would be some advice that you would give to students as far as maybe like marketing themselves as a way to kind of help promote towards having that ability to negotiate their salary? So, when you're going in to kind of make that proposal, you get that, salary maybe from a company, and you think, no, this should be higher. What are some things that students could potentially do, even in that first job, to negotiate their salary, higher, or maybe, better benefits or things like that?
You definitely have to have done your research first. So I would expect you to know what is the average salary for Huntsville, Alabama, for that position, for the number of years of experience that you bring to the table. If it's 0, then it is going to be an entry-level position, but you can still find out what is the expected salary minimum, and perhaps a range as well. A lot of resources are out there, like Glassdoor. The Department of Labor has reports. Indeed, LinkedIn. There are different places that you can find what you think would be the acceptable range. And let's say that acceptable range is between 50 and 65,000 for your role. Well, then you would go into it with that information, and then you would also bring the things to the table that say, this is why I deserve more, or this is why I deserve this minimum. Let's say you go in there and you want 60,000. Well, the reason that I deserve 60,000 is because this, and this. And you're going to bring your experience, your education, your skill set. Make sure your resume speaks to it, but also, if you can, bring examples of your work. maybe have a portfolio. And if this is your first job in the field, that's okay. You can bring class materials. Maybe you wrote a paper, maybe you wrote a draft policy, maybe you created something. And these are all things that you can have as part of your portfolio that says, this is what I'm capable of. This is an example of what I do. And then you want to sell it. So why are you the best? And you need to have really thought this through. Why are you the best person for the job? Why are you asking for this dollar amount based on what you have or what you will have? Like I said, if you're getting ready to graduate, or maybe you're working towards a certificate or something of that nature that will increase your value. Bottom line is, you want to show them what they're getting in return for their money, and you want to position it in a way so they think they're getting a deal. So I'm only asking for $60,000, but all these things I bring to the table, this really is a value of probably $85,000 or more. I'm willing to work with you, and I'm willing to take this lower salary because it is my first job in this field, and that's why. But this is really what I would prefer to make, and I'm willing to meet you. And so then they feel like you're giving. If you tell them my expectation is 85,000, but I'm willing to take 65 given the circumstances, that feels differently to them than if you just say 65 is my number, period. So having thought that through and look at it as you're kind of discounting yourself because you're offering them a discount because this is something that you want, but you do it in a way that demonstrates that value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think so much when we have these conversations about kind of that negotiation part of it, it's so much about communication and communicating well with the potential employer, and helping them to really walk through that process. And you've given a couple examples of this, but are there things that are like absolute, like, don't do in salary negotiation, things that you maybe should avoid completely or think about?
I would definitely avoid going in unprepared.
A little bit about some of the different examples, I think, and what not to do in salary negotiation, but kind of as a whole, what are some things that you would tell students, like, avoid this completely when you're negotiating your salary?
The biggest thing is, don't go in unprepared. You need to have all of your ducks in a row and be able to back up all of your asks with real information and real-time data if you can, as well as examples of your work to prove your worth. Like I mentioned, don't be demanding or impolite, even if they insult you, even if they offer you something that's so low it feels like a slight. Respond appropriately and be professional about it, because like I said, you never know if this doesn't work out for you. You don't know how this connection could lead to something else down the road. And so it's better to just always look at it that way, is don't burn bridges, because this connection could lead you somewhere better down the road. And then don't take it personal. Most companies want to pay you the least amount possible, and that's everyone. Their main goal is to have higher profits and cut costs. So even if it feels insulting, don't be offended, don't take it personal, and know that that's how it is for everyone. And do the best you can. If they won't budge, if you don't feel comfortable with the way things are going, that might be a sign to you that this isn't where you belong. And keep trying, keep putting yourself out there, and the more you negotiate, the more comfortable you will be with negotiations.
I think that's such a great point, and especially your point to discuss of don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
Especially in our area, and I think there's other areas definitely that are so similar to this. You don't know who people know.
Yeah.
And so if you burn a bridge with one company, you're not ever sure if that is not somebody who knows somebody else who knows somebody else. So it's always better to err on that side of being, polite. They're trying to do what's best for their company, and cost is something that they always think about with any employee that they bring in. It costs them a lot of money to even bring in a new employee. And so you really have to think about that and be confident in what you are wanting to get out of that particular position and job, but also remembering that it is about, keeping that good relationship and rapport. Thank you so much for everything you've talked about today. Is there any last advice that you'd want to share with students about salary negotiation?
I did have a couple of things I just wanted to touch on.
Yes.
One thing is, a lot of people don't know this, you do not have to disclose what you currently make. A lot of people will ask you that question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. You may want to, because that may be part of your negotiations. Well, I currently make 125, so I'm not going to take anything less than 135, something like that. But you may not, and 90% of the time I don't disclose that information. They might try to trick you into thinking you have to answer that question. But I'm telling you, you do not have to answer that question. You can evade it. You can tell them, you can put it back on them and say something like, how about you tell me what the range is, and I'll let you know if that meets my expectations. If you have to give a number, then that number should be, this is what I expect to make. Not what I am making now, what I expect to make. And again, that's up to you to come up with that number. I did have 3 questions that I wanted to include that I think are good for people to ask. So you don't want to just have them asking the question. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So one is, how are promotions and pay raises handled? Is there a path to promote? Is the company growing? Will new positions be opening up? Do they promote from within? And is there an annual evaluation process? And if so, can you walk me through that process? Because typically your annual evaluation process is tied to your pay raise and your promotion opportunities. And so it would be good to know from the beginning kind of what that looks like for the company, so that you know, okay, I'm coming on board in July. They promote every year. They go through this cycle in January. So then you kind of know, I have 6 months to start looking to demonstrate value so that I can get a raise when that time comes.
That's so great. And I think that is so incredibly helpful, especially for first-time job seekers. I always think about that question that they'll ask at the end of every interview, do you have any questions? And so often people will go, nope.
Yeah.
And they don't ask anything at all. And so I think those are terrific questions, because it not only sounds incredibly insightful, but it gives you more information about the company. And it goes back to what you talked about, like, you are interviewing the company as well. You are not only there for them to interview you, but you're looking to see, how am I going to fit into this company? And is this company a place where I want to spend my time and my effort? And putting forth that is so incredibly important.
Well, it'll probably help you make your decision too, because what if there's no opportunity for growth? Is that a place you want to be? Maybe it's okay, because maybe you go into it, it's like, this is a stepping stone. I know I'm only going to be here for X number of years and then I'll move on. But it helps you kind of make that decision on if this is even a place you want to be.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Tammara, and talking with us about salary negotiation. I know this is one that so many students have had questions about, and it's just incredibly insightful for anyone really at any stage of their career. We would also like to thank our sponsor, Blue Summit Supplies, for the wonderful facility that we are in and the resources to make this recording possible. A special thank you to our assistant media writer, Macy Morgan, video producer and editor, Jesse Hendricks, and producer, Grace Trutel. I'm your host, Nicole McDavid, and we'll see you next time for more CAHS Career Prep.